In the vastness of space, Earth had always been seen as a backwater planet, a speck of life in the dark, silent void. To the alien races who had expanded their dominion across the stars, humanity was nothing more than a curiosity, a primitive species scrambling to survive. Their technological advancements were no match for the highly developed civilizations that dominated the galaxy. Their military might was laughable. They were weak. But the aliens didn't understand the depths of humanity's will to survive. It was the Sargoth, a brutal and technologically advanced species, that first turned their eyes toward Earth. They had heard whispers of a resource on the planet, something that could make their empire even more invincible. The Sargoth had conquered entire star systems, but now they had set their sights on a world they believed would fall with little effort. The Sargoth invasion was swift. They arrived in their massive, gleaming warships, descending like vultures to pick at a dying carcass. Their army of genetically enhanced soldiers stormed across Earth's continents, and humanity could do little but retreat. Major cities fell within hours, their defenses no match for the alien onslaught. For the first time in history, humans realized they were facing an enemy unlike any they had ever known. The Sargoth thought the war would be over in days, weeks at most. But they hadn't counted on the spirit of humanity. They underestimated what could be accomplished when humans were pushed to the brink. The first sign of the resistance came not from soldiers or governments, but from ordinary civilians. A small group of survivors, trapped in a ruined city, discovered that the aliens' technology could be hacked. At first, it was just a simple sabotage mission, a single transmission to disrupt the Sargotha's communications. But it worked. The aliens were confused. They had never faced an enemy that could fight back in such unconventional ways. Back in the chaos of the war zones, a young woman named Alara stood in the ruins of her city, looking at the remnants of what had once been a thriving metropolis. She had lost everything in the initial attack. Her family, her friends, everything she had known was gone. But unlike the others who had retreated into despair, she refused to give in. Alara had seen the alien ships fall from the sky, their powerful shields now rendered useless by human ingenuity. The Sargoth might have underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, but they would soon learn the cost of that mistake. While humanity had little in terms of firepower or advanced technology, they had something far more dangerous, a fierce will to survive, to protect their home. What the Sargoth didn't realize was that humans, when cornered, could adapt and overcome in ways that no other species could. They were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future of their children, their way of life, and their planet. Alara's group of resistance fighters quickly grew. They started taking the fight to the Sargoth. With each skirmish, they learned more about the alien invaders' technology. They made weapons out of scraps, modified captured Sargoth armor, and used the enemy's own weapons against them. Their ability to adapt, innovate, and turn the tide of battle was unparalleled. It was clear, humanity was not going to roll over and die without a fight. The Sargoth were enraged. They sent in their elite warriors, their top generals, their most fearsome soldiers. But every victory they claimed was met with an even greater loss. Humanity fought back with desperation and ingenuity, never giving the Sargoth a moment to rest. The tide began to shift. But in the heart of the alien command center, the Sargoth leaders were becoming concerned. They were no longer sure they could conquer Earth as easily as they had originally thought. Reports came in of a resistance, unlike any they had ever faced, guerrilla tactics, sabotage, and human resilience all working against them. They had believed humans would bend to their will, that they were weak and fractured. Instead, they had awakened a force more dangerous than anything they could have imagined. A species united by the desire to protect everything they held dear. And Alara? She had become something more than just a survivor. She had become a symbol of resistance. But the Sargoth were beginning to notice her influence. As her group scored victories and gathered more allies, they realized something crucial. Alara wasn't just leading a small band of rebels. She was leading the fight for humanity's future. The Sargoth had underestimated the strength of the human spirit, and they were about to pay the price. The Sargoth High Command was in disarray. For months, their forces had been bogged down in what they had expected to be a brief and effortless conquest. They had sent wave after wave of elite soldiers, advanced weaponry, and cutting-edge technology. And yet, the humans kept fighting back. Every time they thought they had crushed the last of the resistance, another group would rise, with even more daring tactics and technology they had never seen before. What began as an invasion had turned into a prolonged war, one they were beginning to lose. Alara's growing influence in the resistance was undeniable. Her strategic brilliance and unmatched courage had transformed the disparate pockets of humanity's remaining forces into a unified front. The resistance was no longer just a series of small raids. It was a global insurgency, coordinated across continents, targeting the Sargoth's weak points with precision. They had found a way to break the Sargoth's communications, rendering their advanced ships and war machines ineffective. Every time the Sargoth thought they had gained an advantage, the humans struck back harder, more relentlessly. The Sargoth were growing desperate. On a warship high above Earth, the Supreme Commander, Lord Valgrax, paced back and forth, his mind whirling with frustration. His orders had been simple: wipe out humanity. And yet, his forces had encountered unexpected obstacles at every turn. The humans, he now realized, were far more resilient than they had anticipated. They were using tactics his race had never thought to counter, hitting supply lines, sabotaging equipment, spreading fear and confusion among their ranks. He had underestimated them, and now they were turning the tide. "We cannot afford to lose another battle," Valgrax growled to his officers. "Prepare the final strike. This time, we will crush them." But Valgrax's advisors were not so sure. They had been reading the intelligence reports from Earth, and what they saw troubled them. Alara's resistance was not just fighting back, they were evolving. They were adapting to every change in the Sargoth's tactics. This wasn't just about survival anymore. The humans were learning how to fight back on their own terms, not just through brute force, but through intelligence, technology, and unity. Their ingenuity was a force all on its own. In the midst of this struggle, Alara was far from complacent. She had witnessed the shift in the war firsthand. The Sargoth were becoming more ruthless, their attacks more brutal. Entire cities were being leveled as a demonstration of their power, but it was a tactic that only further galvanized the humans' resolve. Alara knew that this wasn't just about defending Earth anymore. It was about proving to the galaxy that humanity could not be easily crushed, that their spirit would not be extinguished by the Sargoth or any other alien empire. Alara gathered her most trusted commanders in a secret underground base, deep within the remains of what was once a major human city. The air was thick with tension as they reviewed the latest intelligence. "They're desperate," said Captain Jalen, a seasoned veteran of the Resistance. "Valgrax won't stop until every last human is dead or enslaved. They're preparing something big." Alara nodded grimly. "I've heard rumors. They're planning a final assault, a strike so overwhelming that we won't be able to fight back." "But we've been winning," Commander Asha pointed out, her voice cautious. "How can they be so confident?" "They're adapting too, Asha," Alara replied. "They've been watching us closely. Every victory we score, they analyze. And they're learning. The Sargoth are a powerful species, but they're not unbeatable. We need to shift our tactics." The plan Alara proposed was audacious, even by Resistance standards. They would infiltrate the heart of the Sargoth's command network and disrupt their final weapon, the very thing that could annihilate Earth's remaining defenses. The humans had already made significant gains in understanding Sargoth technology. Now, they would reverse engineer it and turn their own weaponry against them. To do this, they would need to infiltrate the Sargoth flagship, the Dominion, a massive battlecruiser that had been launching devastating strikes against Earth cities. But that was no easy task. The ship was heavily guarded, and the journey to it would take them deep into enemy-controlled space. Only a handful of the most skilled fighters would stand a chance. Alara volunteered for the mission herself. "If we want to stop this war, we need to take the fight to them." We can't just wait for the Sargoth to bring the battle to our doorstep again. This time we strike first." Her commanders hesitated, but ultimately agreed. If anyone had the skills, the will, and the sheer determination to carry out such a mission, it was Alara. As the plan took shape, Alara found herself looking at the faces of the men and women who had become more than allies. They were family. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she wasn't just fighting for the survival of humanity anymore. She was fighting for the future of every human, every child, and every dream that had once seemed so fragile in the face of overwhelming odds. The war had begun with humanity as the prey, but now it was becoming clear they had evolved. And in this fight, the Sargoth would come to learn the most dangerous truth of all. They had awakened a predator. The mission to infiltrate the Sargoth flagship was a gamble. No one on Earth had ever dared venture so far into enemy territory, let alone plan an attack on the heart of the Sargoth war machine. Alara and her team knew that failure was not an option. If they were to succeed, they needed to take the fight directly to the Sargoth in a way no one had ever imagined. It would take everything they had: intelligence, cunning, and above all, the will to overcome insurmountable odds. As the resistance prepared for the mission, Alara stood on the edge of an old command center, staring out into the dark expanse of space. They had a plan, but plans had a way of crumbling under pressure. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was the moment, the turning point. It was now or never. "We can do this," she murmured to herself, barely aware that Captain Jalen had joined her. "We're all counting on you, Alara," he said, his voice low but full of admiration. "But if this goes south—" "We can't afford that," Alara interrupted, her gaze fixed on the stars. "The Sargoth think they can just crush us under their boots. But they're wrong. We're not the prey. We're the hunters." Jalen smiled faintly, though the tension in his eyes was clear. He and Alara had fought side by side for months, their bond growing stronger with each victory and defeat. The resistance had become a family, and losing any one of them would be a blow that might break the fragile alliance they had built. The mission was set. They would take a stealth shuttle equipped with stolen Sargoth technology and fly deep into enemy space. It was risky. There were no guarantees they could get past the Sargotha's defenses. But they had learned much in recent months, and every bit of knowledge was now a potential weapon. The shuttle, though primitive compared to the advanced Sargoth warships, was outfitted with cloaking devices and electronic warfare systems. Human ingenuity at its finest. As the team boarded the shuttle, Alara took one last look at the ground they had fought so hard to protect. There would be no turning back. They were stepping into the heart of the enemy's domain, a place where their lives would hang by a thread with every moment. The Sargoth were notorious for their vigilance. Any mistake would lead to certain death. The shuttle was launched under the cover of darkness, slipping through Earth's atmosphere and into the cold void of space. The crew was tense but focused, each member knowing their role. Alara and Jalen shared a look of determination as the shuttle's engines hummed steadily beneath them. The journey to the Sargoth flagship, the Dominion, would take days, and during that time, the team prepared. Each member worked silently, calibrating their weapons, analyzing data on Sargoth technology, and studying blueprints of the massive ship they would soon infiltrate. It was a fortress, an immense, floating city of death that had wiped out countless cities on Earth. It was not a place where a small human force could hope to survive, let alone succeed. Alara's plan was simple but dangerous. Infiltrate the flagship, sabotage its core systems, and disable the weapon systems long enough to allow Earth's remaining forces to launch a counteroffensive. The most difficult part would be breaking into the heart of the ship itself, where the command center and the weapon systems were located. The Sargoth had advanced security measures, and their soldiers were genetically enhanced to the point of being nearly invincible. "Once we're inside, we don't stop," Alara briefed her team. "We move fast, hit them hard, and get out. We don't have the luxury of time." Jayla nodded. "What about Valgrax? You think he's on board?" "Doesn't matter," Alara said, her tone sharp. "We're not here to kill him. We're here to break their war machine. Let them send their best warriors to stop us. We'll prove to them that humanity isn't to be underestimated. The shuttle continued its journey, slipping through Sargoth-controlled space like a shadow, guided by the stolen intel the Resistance had gathered. They encountered minimal resistance from the Sargoth patrols, their cloaking technology keeping them undetected. But that was about to change. They were nearing the Dominion, and Alara could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on her. The closer they got, the more real it became. The tension in the air was palpable as the shuttle approached the outer perimeter of the Dominion. The massive warship loomed in the distance, a monstrous structure that seemed to consume the space around it. Its metallic surface gleamed ominously in the dim light of distant stars. Alara could see the patterns of energy signatures across the ship, signs of its formidable defenses. Getting past those defenses would be the first hurdle. "Steady," Alara murmured to her crew as the shuttle edged closer. They were nearly in range of the ship's outer perimeter defenses. The slightest misstep could alert the Sargoth to their presence. Without warning, a red alert flared across the shuttle's console. The ship's cloaking system was starting to destabilize. It wasn't a complete failure, but it was enough to send a wave of panic through the crew. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Alara ordered. She trusted their tech, but the reality of what they were attempting was beginning to sink in. They were going to have to rely on everything they had learned, every advantage they could muster, to avoid being caught. The shuttle shuddered as a Sargoth patrol ship, seemingly out of nowhere, appeared on the radar. It had detected them. "We're not getting through without a fight," Jalen said, gripping the controls. "We don't have time to fight," Alara replied sharply. "We need to get inside the Dominion, now." The shuttle veered sharply, narrowly avoiding the patrol ship's sensors. For a few heart-stopping moments, they seemed to have disappeared into the vastness of space, but the enemy was closing in fast. It was only a matter of time before the Sargoth realized what they were up to. They had one chance to make it inside before the entire fleet descended on them. "We'll make it," Alara whispered, her voice firm. "We have to." And with that, the shuttle breached the Dominion's outer defenses, slipping into the belly of the beast, where the real fight for humanity's survival was about to begin. The shuttle's descent into the Dominion was a breathtaking mix of terror and awe. Alara's heart raced as the team passed through the outer defenses, entering the very belly of the Sargoth warship. The immense size of the flagship was overwhelming. The Dominion was a city in space, a labyrinth of steel and corridors that stretched on for miles. Its dark, foreboding interior was illuminated by an eerie, pulsating glow that seemed to emanate from the ship's core. The shuttle's engines hummed quietly as it navigated into a concealed hangar bay, hidden from view by the ship's various layers of security systems. The moment they landed, the door hissed open, and the team quickly disembarked, moving with the practiced precision that had become second nature over the past months of guerrilla warfare. The air inside the hangar was thick with the scent of machinery and the faint ozone smell of alien technology. Alara's breath caught in her throat as she looked around. The ship was far more advanced than anything she could have imagined. But there was no time to admire the alien technology. They were deep within enemy territory, and the Sargoth were known for their ruthlessness. "We have 30 minutes, Alara whispered, pulling up the map on her wrist console. "The first set of security drones is on a time cycle. We'll move fast, disable them, and proceed to the core. Let's go." The team moved swiftly through the darkened corridors, their boots echoing softly on the metallic floors. They had trained for this moment, and Alara knew every detail of the ship's layout. They had cracked the Sargoth's security protocols in the weeks leading up to this mission, gaining access to blueprints, system weaknesses, and the timing of patrols. Every piece of information was critical to ensuring their success. The further they went into the Dominion, the more dangerous their journey became. The Sargoth had designed the ship with a level of security unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Laser tripwires, sentient surveillance drones, and automatic weapon systems were embedded into the ship's infrastructure. The slightest misstep would trigger alarms and potentially end the mission before it even began. As they rounded a corner, Ilara held up her hand, signaling the team to halt. Her eyes narrowed as she surveyed the room ahead. A large security checkpoint stood between them and the core systems. 2 Sargoth guards, their hulking forms glistening with cybernetic enhancements, stood sentry at the entrance. They were genetically enhanced to the point where their strength and speed far exceeded human limitations. But they weren't invincible. "We take them out quietly," Ilara said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "No noise. No mistakes." Captain Jalen, ever the skilled fighter, nodded. He and Asha, the team's sharpest marksmen, had already positioned themselves on opposite sides of the corridor. Jalen's fingers flexed as he checked his pulse gun, its deadly energy core humming softly. Without a word, Asha aimed her weapon at one of the guards, using a specialized stun round designed to disable the Sargotha's cybernetic enhancements. Jalen moved in the blink of an eye, his knife flashing out and plunging into the second guard's throat before he had a chance to react. The Sargotha's body crumpled silently to the floor. The first guard was incapacitated by Asha's shot just moments later, his body twitching before collapsing. The team swiftly moved forward, disposing of the bodies in a storage locker nearby. They couldn't afford any delays. "Clear," Ilara said, her voice cold with determination. "Keep moving." They made their way deeper into the heart of the Dominion, bypassing more Sargoth guards, automated turrets, and security systems. The tension was palpable. Each moment, each step brought them closer to the core, but also closer to detection. Time was running out, and the closer they got, the more volatile the situation became. They were no longer simply infiltrating a ship. They were infiltrating a living fortress. The Sargoth were powerful, but this ship was their pride and joy. After what seemed like hours of moving in silence, the team finally reached the central nerve center of the Dominion, a vast, open chamber where rows of consoles and terminals were monitored by several high-ranking Sargoth officers. It was here that the ship's weapon systems, as well as the communications network, were controlled. It was also where the final assault on Earth was being planned. Ilara's eyes locked onto the central control panel, a massive holographic display that showed the Sargotha's weapons targeting systems. She could see Earth's cities marked for destruction, targets that had already been hit, and others that were about to feel the Sargotha's wrath. "This is it," Ilara said, her voice tight with anger. "We stop this here." Asha stepped forward, her eyes scanning the terminal. "I'll need 10 minutes to hack into their systems and disable the weapons. Can you hold them off for that long?" Ilara nodded, her hand already on her pulse gun. "We'll create a distraction. You do your job." The team split into 2 groups. Ilara, Jalen, and Asha took up positions near the control panel, while the others fanned out to cover the room. The officers at the consoles hadn't noticed them yet, but that wouldn't last long. As Ilara's heart raced, the tension in the room grew unbearable. A loud hum filled the chamber as the Sargoth officers began to notice the intruders. Ilara didn't hesitate. She fired first, sending a burst of energy into the closest officer's chest. The Sargoth stumbled backward, his armor sparking from the impact, before crumpling to the ground. The other officers reacted instantly, drawing their weapons. The firefight that ensued was fast and brutal. The Sargoth were far superior in terms of strength and speed, but the humans had an edge that the aliens didn't anticipate: desperation and sheer willpower. The resistance fighters moved with a precision that only months of fighting had honed. They ducked, rolled, and fired in synchronized bursts, forcing the Sargoth back. "Almost done," Asha called out, her fingers flying over the hacked control panel. 5 more minutes. Ilara gritted her teeth. The Sargoth were relentless, but they would not be stopped. This was humanity's fight for survival, and they would win. The firefight raged in the heart of the Dominion's nerve center, and the team was running on sheer adrenaline. The Sargoth officers, towering and augmented with cybernetic enhancements, were formidable opponents. But humanity had something the Sargoth had failed to account for: an insatiable hunger to survive, to fight for everything that had been taken from them. This was more than just a battle. This was a war for their home, their families, their future. Alara's pulse gun flashed in the dim light, sending bursts of energy into the chest of a Sargoth officer who had been advancing toward her. His armor flickered before collapsing to the floor. Jalen moved swiftly behind her, his blade flashing out to disarm another officer before following up with a quick, lethal strike. "We need to keep them contained," Jalen shouted, his voice harsh with exertion. Alara nodded, her eyes scanning the room. They had already taken down 2 of the officers, but more were pouring in. She had no doubt that reinforcements would be arriving any moment. They needed to finish what they came for before the entire Sargoth force arrived. Asha, at the control panel, was moving with incredible speed, her fingers dancing across the alien interface. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she hacked through the Sargotha's advanced security protocols, her eyes flicking from one display to another. The countdown to disable the weapon systems was ticking, each second stretching out like an eternity. How much longer? Alara called over her shoulder, her voice tight as she fired off another shot, dropping a Sargoth soldier in the doorway. Asha gritted her teeth. "Almost there. I'm bypassing their secondary encryption. Just give me a few more seconds." Alara turned to Jalen, motioning for him to cover Asha. "Keep them off her. We can't fail now." Jalen nodded, already moving into position. He threw a grenade into the corridor, the explosion reverberating through the ship as a group of Sargoth soldiers were thrown backward, their armor scorched and cracked. It wasn't enough to take them out, but it bought Asha the time she needed. The alien officers had regrouped, and they were more focused than ever. Alara could see the desperation in their eyes as they rushed toward the humans, unwilling to let them sabotage their flagship. But Alara wasn't going to let them win. Not now. Not after everything they had endured. "Done." Asha's voice rang out triumphantly. "The weapon systems are offline. They can't fire on Earth anymore." Alara's heart skipped a beat, but there was no time to savor the victory. The ship was already shifting into defensive mode, and alarms blared throughout the chamber. "Let's move," Alara shouted, as the room shook with the sounds of Sargoth forces closing in from every direction. But just as they turned to make their escape, the door at the far end of the room hissed open, and a massive Sargoth warlord stepped through. His body was a grotesque fusion of organic and machine, cybernetic enhancements bulging from every limb, his eyes glowing with an eerie blue light. He was the embodiment of the Sargotha's relentless pursuit of power, their brutal efficiency. The warlord's voice boomed, carrying an air of finality. "You've made a grave mistake, humans." Alara's pulse quickened. The warlord's mere presence sent a chill through her spine. This was the one they'd been dreading, the Sargotha's ultimate weapon, a living nightmare who was both the apex of their technological advancements and the embodiment of their cruelty. His name was Zalgor, and he was known for annihilating entire resistance cells with nothing more than his bare hands. "We're not done yet," Alara muttered, her eyes narrowing. Jalen stepped forward, his eyes locked on Zalgor. "We're not backing down. Not now. Not ever." Asha quickly grabbed a small device from her belt, a detonator that would trigger a massive charge planted in the lower levels of the Dominion. It was their escape plan, their fail-safe in case things went south. If they couldn't get out in time, they would bring the ship down around them. But that wasn't their first choice. They needed to fight to win. Zalgor's metal-clad fist clenched, and a deep, menacing growl rumbled from his throat. Without warning, he lunged at Jalen, his movements impossibly fast for a being so large. Jalen barely had time to react, rolling to the side, just as Zalgor's fist slammed into the ground where he had been standing. The impact was so powerful that the floor cracked beneath them. Asha's voice was steady but urgent. "Alara, we need to go. We can't fight him and win." Alara shook her head, her eyes hard. "We don't have a choice." The warlord charged again, but this time Alara was ready. She ducked under his massive fist and fired, aiming for the exposed joints of his cybernetic limbs. Her shots ricocheted off his armored plating, but she wasn't trying to kill him. She was trying to slow him down. "Jalen," Ilara shouted, her voice sharp. "Now." Jalen acted immediately. He vaulted over the warlord's head, using his enhanced agility to land behind Zalgor. With one swift motion, he planted a small explosive device on the warlord's back. It wouldn't be enough to kill him, but it would buy them a few precious seconds. Zalgor roared in fury, whirling around to face Jalen. But it was too late. The explosive detonated with a blinding flash, sending the warlord stumbling backward, smoke billowing from his cybernetic frame. Ilara didn't hesitate. "Fall back." Now. They ran, their boots pounding against the metal floors, as the warlord recovered and began to chase after them, his fury palpable. They didn't stop, not for a second, as they sprinted through the winding corridors of the Dominion, moving as fast as they could toward the shuttle bay. But the Sargoth were everywhere now. As they rounded a corner, they saw a whole squad of soldiers blocking their way, weapons aimed at their heads. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. They were surrounded. "We're running out of time," Asha whispered, her hand on the detonator. "We can't hold them off much longer." "Then we make our stand here," Ilara said, drawing a deep breath. "For Earth." The moment of truth had arrived. The team was cornered, surrounded by Sargoth soldiers at every exit. Ilara's pulse raced, her mind calculating their options at lightning speed. There was no way to fight their way through without being overwhelmed. And if they tried to escape, the Dominion's security would close in, locking down the entire ship. A sense of finality pressed down on her shoulders. They were out of time, and the weight of Earth's survival rested heavily on their shoulders. But there was still hope, however slim it might be. The detonator in Asha's hand was their last chance. The self-destruct charge was rigged to trigger in a few minutes, taking the flagship with it. The only problem was there was no way they could all escape in time. "Ilara," Jalen said, his voice strained but steady. "We can't win this fight, but we can make sure they don't follow us. The self-destruct is our only chance." She nodded. "Asha, how long?" Asha's eyes flickered to the detonator. "It's armed, but I can't hold it long. If we don't get out now, we'll be trapped in here with them." "We fight to the end," Ilara said, her voice fierce. "They're not taking the Dominion back. Not after what we've done here." She turned to face their enemies. The Sargoth soldiers were closing in, their cold, calculating eyes filled with contempt. They had been bred to be the perfect soldiers, brutal, efficient, and merciless. But Ilara had something they didn't: humanity's indomitable spirit. "Take your positions," she ordered. "We'll make them remember us." The team moved into their final defensive positions, weapons raised and ready. The Sargoth soldiers were too many, but they were also too confident. They thought the resistance was broken, that they could simply wipe them out and continue their conquest. They couldn't fathom the resolve of humans who had nothing left to lose. Jalen gripped his rifle tightly, his eyes scanning the room for the first signs of movement. Asha had positioned herself near the detonator, ready to trigger it if necessary. The others spread out, their backs to the walls, taking up strategic positions to ensure they could cover each other. The silence was oppressive. Then, like a thunderclap, the Sargoth soldiers charged, their footsteps reverberating through the halls. The team opened fire immediately, energy blasts lighting up the darkness. Ilara's mind was in overdrive. She could see the path ahead. This fight was a distraction, a final stand to ensure that the Sargoth would never be able to use the Dominion against Earth again. She fired, taking out 2 Sargoth soldiers with a single shot to their exposed limbs. Her movements were fluid, calculated, each shot a response to the alien soldiers' positions. Jalen was beside her, his movements a blur as he took down a Sargoth officer with a well-placed strike to the chest. But for every one they took down, 2 more seemed to take their place. Ilara ducked behind a support column as a Sargoth warlord advanced, his massive form nearly filling the doorway. His cybernetic limbs whirred with deadly precision as he swung a massive energy sword toward her. She barely managed to duck, the blade slicing through the air inches above her head. No time for hesitation. She scrambled to her feet, her pulse gun aimed at the warlord's exposed side. With a quick shot, She hit the weak point where the metal met the organic tissue. The warlord howled in pain, but he was still coming, faster now, his enhanced muscles propelling him with terrifying speed. Jalen! Alara shouted, desperate. Jalen didn't hesitate. He leaped into action, his body moving like a shadow. He closed the distance with the warlord in a fraction of a second, his combat knife flashing out and stabbing into the warlord's throat. The alien staggered back, his glowing eyes dimming as the blood drained from his neck. Alara didn't wait to watch the warlord collapse. She turned her attention to the rest of the Sargoth soldiers, who were now closing in from all sides. The situation was dire, and she knew that they couldn't keep up this fight much longer. Their ammunition was running low, and their energy was waning. The detonator was still in Asha's hands, but there was a chance the Sargoth could seize it if they weren't careful. "We've got to go now," Alara shouted. Asha nodded grimly, activating the countdown. 5 minutes until detonation, she said, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "We won't make it if they breach this area." They needed a way out, and fast. "We'll fight until we can't," Jalen said, his voice resolute as he checked his weapon. "But we can't let them follow us. The Dominion's done for. It's over." But even as they said the words, the Sargoth soldiers seemed to sense the change. The fight was no longer a skirmish, it was a battle for survival. The enemy forces were relentless, pushing harder, faster, more vicious with each passing moment. Alara's mind raced. "Asha, get ready to trigger the charge when I say so. We'll make a break for it, and if they follow us..." "They'll never get the chance," Asha finished, her eyes meeting Alara's. "Just say the word." With one final glance at her team, Alara nodded. It was time. "Now," she barked. They broke into a sprint, barreling down the narrow hallways toward the shuttle bay. Sargoth soldiers fired at them from behind, but their shots were erratic. Their focus split between the humans and the impending explosion. The countdown echoed in Alara's mind, each passing second reminding her of how close they were to the end. As they neared the shuttle bay, Alara's stomach churned. She could hear the distant rumble of the ship's systems beginning to shift as the self-destruct countdown continued. The shuttle bay doors loomed ahead, but before they could reach it, a sudden blast knocked them all to the ground. A massive explosion rocked the walls, and for a terrifying moment, Alara's vision swam in the smoke and chaos. She struggled to get back on her feet, shaking her head to clear the fog. "Go! Go!" Jalen yelled, his voice urgent. They rushed into the shuttle bay, and just as the first Sargoth soldiers began to enter, Asha pressed the detonator. The explosion was deafening. The Dominion groaned, its core systems failing as the ship began to tear itself apart. Alara didn't look back. She didn't need to. The ship was doomed. "Hold on," Jalen shouted as they all jumped into the shuttle, sealing the doors just in time. The shuttle rocketed into the depths of space, escaping the destruction just as the Dominion shattered in a series of violent explosions. As the stars outside the shuttle filled their view, Alara allowed herself a moment to breathe. Earth had been saved. The Sargoth flagship was no more. But the war was far from over. The shuttle's engines hummed steadily, a calming sound in the chaos that had consumed the Dominion. The sky outside was a deep, endless black, dotted with distant stars. Alara stared at the view, her mind racing even as her body finally started to relax. Her hands, still gripping the controls, were slick with sweat. The cold void outside was a stark contrast to the heat of the battle they had just fought. They were alive. The self-destruct had worked. The Dominion, the Sargoth flagship, was no more. But the cost of this victory was clear. The mission had claimed more than just lives. It had taken a toll on their very souls. "Status report," Alara said, her voice hoarse. She had to focus. They had done the impossible, but there was no time to revel in the victory. They still had to get home, and the Sargoth would want revenge. Jalen, the ever-steady captain, was sitting beside her, his face bruised and bloodied, but his eyes sharp. "We've got a clear path out of Sargoth space for now. The Dominion is gone, but that doesn't mean the Sargoth will give up. They'll send everything after us. We've got no allies out here." Alara nodded. It was exactly what she feared. The Sargoth had lost one of their greatest assets, but their pursuit would be relentless. The war was far from over. Humanity had just earned a small victory, but there was no telling what horrors awaited them next. Asha, sitting in the back, was still working at her terminal, trying to get a clear communications link to Earth. She had been quiet, her face pale from the physical and emotional strain. She had worked tirelessly to disable the weapon systems on the Dominion, but she had also just witnessed the destruction of an entire fleet. Her fingers hovered over the console, but her mind seemed elsewhere. "I'm trying to reach Earth," she said softly, not looking up from her screen. "But there's too much interference. They'll be picking up on the debris for weeks. It's going to be hard to get through." Alara's throat tightened. Earth had to know what had happened. They needed to know that humanity wasn't finished, that they had struck back. The Resistance had done the impossible. They had crippled the Sargotha's war machine, dealt a blow that would echo across the galaxy. But the fight wasn't over. Not yet. "We'll figure it out," Alara said, though her voice was less certain than she'd like it to be. "We'll find a way." "Let's just hope the Sargoth don't find us first," Jalen added, his tone grim. As they drifted through space, the atmosphere in the shuttle grew tense. The quiet was broken only by the occasional beep of Asha's console as she worked to clear a path for communication. But the silence between the team members spoke volumes. They were all struggling with the weight of their actions. The devastation that had unfolded, the Dominion's destruction, the lives lost, was something they would carry forever. They had done what had to be done, but the consequences were far from over. "Earth doesn't know yet," Jalen murmured. "They don't know we stopped the Sargoth. We've got to get word to them." Alara glanced at him, her mind spinning. "We will. But we've got bigger problems right now. The Sargoth are not going to sit idly by after losing the Dominion. They'll retaliate." Asha's voice was quiet, almost distant, as she spoke up. "I've made a few adjustments to the comms. If we can get close enough to a relay station, we might be able to send a distress signal. But if the Sargoth detect us, we'll be sitting ducks." Alara's hand clenched around the shuttle's controls. They were playing with fire, and the stakes were too high for mistakes. She had seen the lengths the Sargoth were willing to go to, the cruelty in their eyes. They wouldn't stop until humanity was crushed under their heel. "We'll take the risk," Alara said. "We don't have a choice. Earth needs to know, and we need to know if we have any support out there." The silence that followed her words was filled with the unspoken tension of what they were about to do. There was no turning back. The Sargoth were hunting them, and their next move would determine the future of humanity. Hours later, the shuttle approached a small, seemingly insignificant relay station on the edge of the star system. It wasn't much, just a scrap of metal and technology, but it was their lifeline. The shuttle coasted in, its engines humming softly as Alara prepared to dock. "Asha," Alara said, her voice tight. "Can you get through?" Asha didn't answer at first. She was focused, her fingers dancing over the controls with incredible speed. Her eyes flicked over the readouts, her brow furrowed in concentration. It was clear she was working with everything she had, pushing herself beyond the limit. "Almost," Asha said at last, her voice strained. "It's going to be close." Alara exhaled slowly. "Keep going." They all knew what was at stake. If the Sargoth detected the transmission, they would be dead. If they didn't send the message, humanity would remain unaware of the battle they had won, and the Sargoth would have the upper hand. The tension in the shuttle was unbearable. Every second felt like an eternity. The radio crackled, and then, suddenly, Asha's voice broke through the silence. "I've done it," Asha said, a mix of exhaustion and relief in her voice. "The signal is out." Alara felt the weight lift off her shoulders. "You did it." "We've got a chance," Asha added quietly. "Now we just have to hope they get it." Alara turned to Jalen, who was watching her carefully, his eyes filled with determination. They had done it. They had struck the first blow, and now they had given humanity a chance to strike back. But the war wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Alara's gaze drifted to the stars outside the shuttle's viewport. The vast, cold expanse of space stretched before them, a reminder that while they had won a battle, the war was still to be fought. And this was only the beginning. The shuttle drifted in the darkness of space, its engines humming steadily as it approached the edge of the star system. Asha leaned back in her seat, exhausted but alert, her eyes scanning the comms console for any sign that their distress signal had been received. The minutes stretched on in silence, the weight of the unknown pressing heavily on all of them. Each second felt like an eternity, and the looming shadow of the Sargoth fleet was never far from their minds. Alara sat in the pilot's seat, her hands gripping the controls as she navigated them closer to the rendezvous point. There was no turning back now. Jalen stood near the rear of the shuttle, his eyes focused out the back viewport, watching for any signs of pursuit. The Sargoth fleet could be right behind them, and they would need to be ready to fight for their lives, again. Any sign of a response? Alara asked, her voice tight with tension. Asha shook her head, her fingers still flying across the console. Nothing yet, but I'm keeping a signal active. We might be too far out of range for a reply just yet. Damn it, Jayla muttered. We've risked everything on this signal. If Earth doesn't get it, they'll get it, Alara interrupted firmly. We've done all we can. Now we wait. And if the Sargoth find us first, we fight. The shuttle coasted silently through space, a small speck in the vastness of the cosmos. But inside, the tension was palpable. Each passing minute brought them closer to either salvation or annihilation. The Sargoth could be on their tail, preparing to finish what they had started, wiping out the human resistance once and for all. Suddenly, the comms console flickered to life, cutting through the quiet like a bolt of lightning. Asha's eyes widened as the console came to life with activity. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. It's a response, Asha said, her voice barely a whisper. We're getting a signal back. Ilara's pulse quickened as she leaned forward, her eyes locked on the readout. The transmission was faint, the signal distorted and garbled, but there was no mistaking it. It was coming from Earth. Patch it through, Ilara ordered, her voice sharp. Asha worked quickly, her fingers moving swiftly to establish the connection. The distorted voice that crackled through the speakers was unrecognizable at first, but as the static cleared, Ilara's breath caught in her throat. This is Earth Command, the voice said, crackling with urgency. We've received your distress signal. You've done it. You've crippled the Sargoth fleet. Ilara's heart surged with hope. Earth had heard them. They weren't alone anymore. We've mobilized reinforcements, the voice continued, a note of disbelief in the speaker's voice. We've known for a while that you were out there, but we never thought the resistance would pull off something like this. We're deploying a fleet to your coordinates now. You're not alone anymore. Ilara felt her knees go weak, the tension in her body releasing all at once. They had done it. The resistance had pulled off the impossible, and now Earth was coming to their aid. But there was no time for relief. How long until we can expect reinforcements? Jalen asked, his voice steady but with a hard edge of urgency. We're sending a fleet as quickly as we can, the voice from Earth Command replied. It'll take time. We don't know exactly how long you've got before the Sargoth regroup and retaliate. Stay where you are. Keep the shuttle systems on standby. We'll find you. Understood, Ilara said, her voice calm, but her thoughts already racing. We'll hold position. The transmission ended, and the console went silent once more. Asha let out a long breath, her hands shaking slightly. We did it, she murmured, her voice barely audible. Earth knows. They're coming. Ilara's eyes were already scanning the star map, plotting their next move. Not yet. We don't have time to celebrate. The Sargoth are going to come after us, and they'll be looking for us in every corner of this sector. We need to stay ahead of them. We can't let them track our position. Jayla nodded. We need to move before they pick up on our signal. Let's get to the rendezvous point and make sure we're ready to fight back if we have to. With a firm nod, Ilara adjusted the shuttle's course, aiming them toward a small, hidden asteroid belt on the outer rim of the star system. The dense asteroid field was their best chance at evading the Sargoth for now. If they could stay hidden long enough, they might just make it. Keep the comms open, Ilara said, her voice now focused and steady. We're not out of the woods yet, but Earth is on the way. We have a real shot at turning the tide, but we'll need to keep our heads in the game. The shuttle's engines hummed as they coasted toward the asteroid belt. The journey was slow, but it was the safest route they had. Asha continued to monitor the comms, watching for any signs of the Sargoth as they entered the dense field. The rest of the crew remained on high alert, their weapons ready, prepared for whatever came next. Hours passed as they navigated through the asteroid field. The silence between them was only broken by the occasional beep of the shuttle systems and Asha's occasional updates. But despite the quiet, the tension never left. They all knew the Sargoth would be coming for them. We're clear, Asha said after what felt like an eternity. I'm not picking up any signs of the Sargoth for now, but I can't guarantee they won't detect us soon. Ilara exhaled, the weight on her chest momentarily lifting. For now we wait. Earth's coming. We just need to hold out a little longer. They sat in the silence of the asteroid field, each lost in their thoughts. The galaxy seemed so vast and unyielding, but now, for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope. Earth had received their message, and reinforcements were on the way. But the war was far from over. The silence of the asteroid field was deafening, as if space itself was holding its breath. The shuttle drifted among the jagged rocks, hidden within the dense debris that scattered the void. They had found a temporary sanctuary, but Ilara knew it wouldn't last long. The Sargoth were too persistent, and their retaliation would be swift. We can't stay here forever, Jalen said, his voice cutting through the stillness. He stood near the viewport, staring out into the inky blackness, the outlines of distant asteroids faintly visible in the low light. I know, Ilara replied, her voice low but resolute. She continued to monitor the shuttle systems, checking for any signs of external detection. But we can't afford to make a move until Earth gets closer. If we leave now, we risk giving ourselves away. The Sargoth are still out there. They'll be hunting for us. Asha, her fingers nervously tapping at her console, glanced up. The longer we stay here, the more chance we have of being discovered. The Sargoth are methodical. They'll search every inch of this system if they have to. We've got to be ready. The weight of the situation settled heavily on them. Every minute that passed felt like a countdown to disaster. They had just made the impossible happen, crippling the Sargotha's flagship, sending the first signal of resistance Earth had received in years. But they couldn't afford to rest on their laurels. Not yet. I'm keeping the comms open, Asha said, her voice a mix of determination and anxiety. If Earth's fleet responds, I'll be able to get through. But we might not have much time. Ilara nodded. We'll hold tight. If the Sargoth come for us, we fight. We won't go down without making them regret it. Suddenly, a sharp beep rang through the shuttle's comm system, cutting through the tension like a knife. Asha's eyes snapped to her screen, her pulse quickening. Incoming transmission, she said, her voice tense. Earth. Ilara asked, her heart leaping in her chest. Asha's fingers danced across the console, pulling up the transmission. The voice that came through was distorted, crackling with static, but there was no mistaking it. This is Earth Command, the voice said, strained and urgent. We've detected Sargoth movement in your sector. Their fleet is closing in on your position. You don't have much time. We're doing everything we can to get our forces to you, but you need to prepare for a fight. They won't let you escape again. Ilara's heart dropped. They had barely a few hours, maybe less, before the Sargoth would be upon them. The fleet they had fought so hard to cripple had regrouped, and now, with vengeance in their hearts, they were coming for the humans who had dared to challenge them. Understood, Ilara said, her voice steely. We're ready. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the shuttle in the oppressive quiet once more. Asha didn't look up, but Ilara could see the tension in her shoulders, the weight of the responsibility she bore. They had succeeded in sending the message to Earth, but the real fight was now about to begin. We've got to get moving, Jalen said, his tone grim. He turned to Ilara, determination in his eyes. We can't wait for Earth to save us. We have to fight like this is our last stand. Ilara turned to him, meeting his gaze. She knew the weight of what he was saying. They had come this far, but they couldn't let themselves be dependent on outside help. The Sargoth wouldn't give them the luxury of waiting. They had to make every moment count. "We'll make it count," Ilara replied, her voice low but filled with the fire of resolve. "But first, we need to get to the rendezvous point. If Earth's fleet is coming, we'll need to be in position to assist them when they arrive." Asha finally looked up, her face pale but resolute. "I'm not sure how much longer we can stay hidden here. We need to either move or risk being cornered." "We move," Ilara said decisively. "We head to the rendezvous. Earth's fleet might be our only chance." Hours later, the shuttle emerged from the asteroid field and entered the outer rim of the system, on a course toward the rendezvous point Earth Command had given them. The journey was slow and deliberate. Every scan of the systems, every piece of technology used, a calculated risk. Asha had her hands full trying to keep the shuttle undetected by the Sargotha's advanced scanners. But time was slipping away, and the pressure mounted. Ilara was deep in thought, her fingers tapping the console rhythmically as she plotted their course. They were close now, but so were the Sargoth. Their fleet was closing in, a looming threat that they could not outrun for much longer. "Status?" Ilara asked, breaking the tense silence. Asha looked up, her face drawn. "We're getting close to the rendezvous. But we're not alone anymore. The Sargoth fleet's been detected on long-range scans. They're closing in fast. We won't be able to outrun them for long." Ilara's heart pounded in her chest. "We can't afford to outrun them. We have to face them. We're too close to the rendezvous to turn back now." "We'll fight," Jalen said, stepping forward, his voice steady. "But we have to be smart about it. We can't let them pick us off one by one." Asha nodded, her fingers flying across the console. "I'm making some modifications to the shuttle's weapons. It won't be much, but it'll give us an edge." Ilara's grip tightened on the controls. "Make it count, Asha. We've got one shot at this." Outside, the stars blurred as they entered the final stretch of their journey. The shuttle's engines hummed in quiet determination, its systems readied for the fight ahead. The Sargoth fleet was almost upon them, but Earth was coming. They had done the impossible, and now they were about to face their greatest test yet. Minutes later, the shuttle arrived at the rendezvous point, an old, abandoned mining station on the edge of the star system. Its derelict hull was barely visible against the black void, and it was the perfect place to stage a final defense. Asha had managed to jam their location, but there was no time to waste. "We've got incoming," Jalen said, his eyes scanning the sensors. "They're here." The Sargoth fleet appeared on the edge of the system, a deadly shadow moving swiftly toward them. Ilara's heart raced. This was it. There would be no retreat. No more hiding. The only thing left was to fight, and to make the Sargoth regret underestimating humanity. "Ilara," Asha said, her voice tight with urgency, "Earth's fleet is on its way, but they won't be here in time to stop the Sargoth from tearing us apart. We have to hold them off long enough for reinforcements to arrive." Ilara nodded. "Then we fight. Together." The shuttle systems powered up, its weapons ready, as the first wave of Sargoth ships closed in. The final battle for humanity's future had begun. The shuttle's weapons hummed to life, and the low whine of the energy shields charging filled the cabin. Ilara's fingers tightened on the controls as her heart beat in time with the ticking clock. The Sargoth fleet was closing in, their massive ships moving with deadly precision. They were here to finish what they had started. But Ilara refused to let them have the final word. "Ready?" Jalen asked, his voice grim but filled with the resolve of a soldier who had faced death before and refused to blink. Ilara nodded. "We're outnumbered, but we've got the advantage of terrain. The station's debris, the asteroid field, it'll be our cover. We fight like we're not alone, because we're not." Asha looked up from her console, her eyes wide but determined. "The Sargoth are lining up for an attack. They've already deployed fighter craft. They're not going to waste any time." "We don't need time," Ilara said, her voice cold as ice. "We've got a few minutes to slow them down before Earth arrives." Let's make them count. Jalen stepped toward the weapons console. I'll take point. We're going to need every ounce of firepower we've got. The shuttle's engines roared to life, and Alara steered them toward the looming mining station. The debris field around them was dense, an ancient wreckage of forgotten ships, asteroids, and shattered stations, and it was their only hope of surviving the next few minutes. They would need to outmaneuver the Sargatha's superior numbers. The first wave of Sargoth fighters appeared, a swarm of sleek, dark ships that flitted in and out of the debris like shadows. Their engines burned bright as they closed in on the shuttle. The fighter craft were agile, and their weapons were designed to obliterate smaller targets like the shuttle. But Alara had learned how to fight smarter, not harder. Stay close to the wreckage, Alara ordered. Use the asteroids. Keep them guessing. The shuttle lurched forward as Alara slammed the control yoke to the left, diving between a series of large chunks of twisted metal. The Sargoth fighters followed, their plasma guns firing relentlessly. The bright green beams sliced through the void, barely missing the shuttle's shields. Sparks flew as some of the shots grazed their hull. Shields at 75%, Asha reported, her voice strained but calm. We can take a few more hits, but we need to make them count. Jalen opened fire, his aim deadly accurate. The shuttle's weapon systems unleashed a barrage of laser fire, tearing through one of the enemy fighters. It exploded in a burst of fire and debris, sending pieces of it spinning off into space. But there were more on the way, so many more. Another volley of plasma fire streaked past them, narrowly missing the shuttle. Alara gritted her teeth, pushing the throttle to full power as they ducked behind a large asteroid, using the rock as a shield. The Sargoth were relentless, but they were also predictable. We need to break their formation, Jalen said. They're using their numbers against us. We have to find a way to disrupt them. Alara's mind raced. They didn't have the luxury of time, but they had the advantage of knowing the terrain. She banked sharply, flying low along the surface of a massive asteroid before veering upward. The Sargoth fighters followed, too eager to land the kill shot. Now Jalen. Alara shouted. Jalen activated the shuttle's flares, releasing a burst of bright, distracting lights and heat signatures into space. The Sargoth fighters locked onto the false targets, their weapons firing in a flurry of bright plasma beams that missed their mark by miles. It was the moment they needed. The fighters were disoriented, and the shuttle took advantage of the brief lull. We're clear for now, Asha said, her voice filled with quiet relief. But they'll regroup. We've bought ourselves a few seconds. Alara didn't waste any time. We need to give Earth's fleet time to get here. Prepare for the next wave. The shuttle's sensors began to blare, and a new wave of enemy ships appeared, larger this time. The Sargatha's main ships, their enormous war cruisers, were closing in. Each one was capable of obliterating the shuttle with a single well-placed shot. But the Sargoth fleet had underestimated humanity's will to survive. Can we take one of them out? Alara asked, eyes locked on the massive enemy ships approaching. Maybe. If we can get within range of their engines, we might have a shot, Jalen said. His fingers hovered over the weapons console, his body coiled with tension. Asha tapped away at the console, her face illuminated by the cold glow of the screens. I've got a lock on one of their cruisers. I can send a pulse through the asteroid field to destabilize their weapons. It'll give us a few more seconds. Alara grinned, the fire of determination burning in her eyes. Do it. The shuttle sped toward the largest of the Sargoth cruisers, weaving between asteroids and wreckage to stay out of their line of fire. The massive ship loomed larger in their viewports, its weapons charging. Asha hit a button, and suddenly, a pulse of energy rippled through the asteroid field. It hit the Sargoth cruiser's weapons array, sending shockwaves through its systems. For a brief moment, its weapons malfunctioned, unable to fire. Now Jalen. Alara barked. Jalen fired a well-aimed shot directly at the cruiser's engine core, unleashing a devastating blast. The massive warship shuddered, and a violent explosion tore through its hull. The ship's power core detonated, and the cruiser broke apart, sending debris flying in all directions. One down, but the rest were still coming. That's one, Jalen said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. But we've got more to go. Ilara set her jaw. They weren't done yet. Minutes later, the Sargoth fleet was in disarray, their formation broken, their morale shaken. The destruction of one of their flagships had thrown them into chaos. But more were closing in, relentless in their pursuit. In the distance, a massive fleet of ships emerged from the edge of the star system, Earth's fleet. Thousands of ships, their weapons bristling with firepower, were heading toward the battle. "We've got backup," Asha shouted, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Finally," Ilara muttered, but her focus remained on the task at hand. "Let's hold the line until they get here." The battle raged on, and Ilara pushed the shuttle to its limits. The Sargoth were not going to let up, but humanity had given them a taste of what they were capable of. The resistance was no longer a whisper in the dark, it was a storm. The final push came when Earth's fleet arrived, its ships unleashing a barrage of fire that tore through the remaining Sargoth forces. The Sargoth's retaliation was swift, but it was clear they had underestimated humanity's resolve. By the time the battle was over, the Sargoth fleet was in ruins, their forces scattered, their morale broken. Earth's fleet had arrived just in time, but the human resistance had dealt the decisive blow. After the battle, the shuttle hovered among the wreckage, the stars in the distance, now the backdrop to humanity's victory. Ilara leaned back in her seat, exhausted but triumphant. They had won. The war was far from over, but the first true victory for humanity had been won on this day. Earth had heard their call, and the Sargoth had learned that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. "We did it," Asha said, her voice filled with awe. "We actually did it." Jalen looked out into the debris field, his face weary but resolute. "This is only the